The handcuffs clicked shut around 15-year-old wrists, a sound that would echo through a police station, a city hall, and eventually into the shadows where real power doesn't wear a badge. The crack of shattering glass echoed across the sidewalk like a judgment. 15-year-old Jamal Andre stood frozen, his hands raised instinctively as milk spread across the concrete in a white pool that reflected the flashing red and blue lights. He'd only stepped out to buy groceries for his grandmother. A 5-minute errand that should have been ordinary, forgettable. Officer Bradley Cooper, 42 years old with 17 years on the force and a reputation for cleaning up the streets, stepped out of his cruiser with the confidence of a man who'd never been questioned. His hand rested on his holstered weapon, his jaw set in that familiar expression of authority that had intimidated dozens before Jamal. Lincoln Grocery sat on the corner of 8th and Madison, the kind of neighborhood store where families bought bread, lottery tickets, and hope in equal measure. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the hour when working parents sent their kids on quick errands before dinner. The kind of moment that should have been safe. Hands on the wall. Now. Cooper's voice cut through the evening air. Jamal didn't panic, didn't shout. His dark eyes remained steady, watching, calculating, a composure unusual for a 15-year-old boy facing down an armed officer. He placed his palms flat against the brick wall, the rough surface warm from the day's sun. "Sir, I just bought," Jamal began. "Save it." Cooper shoved him harder against the wall, the force knocking the breath from Jamal's lungs. "We got a report of theft from this location. You fit the description." Around them, the street came alive. Mrs. Doyle from the laundromat paused mid-fold. 2 teenagers across the street pulled out their phones. A young mother pulled her daughter closer, whispering something about staying out of trouble. The description. The same 2 words used too many times, in too many neighborhoods, against too many boys who looked like Jamal. As Cooper pulled out his handcuffs, Jamal's fingers moved with practiced precision. A double tap on the phone in his jacket pocket that his father had taught him months ago. The screen stayed dark, but the microphone activated, capturing every word, every breath, every metallic click of the cuffs closing around his wrists. "Officer, is this necessary?" called out Mr. Abrams, the store owner, standing in the doorway with a receipt still in his hand. "The boy just paid for—" Cooper shot him a look that silenced further protest. "Unless you want to be charged with obstruction, I suggest you step back inside." Mr. Abrams hesitated. A good man caught between doing what's right and protecting his business. He lowered his eyes and retreated into the store, the door chiming softly behind him like a funeral bell for justice. "You got anything to say for yourself?" Cooper muttered as he pushed Jamal toward the cruiser. Jamal's voice was quiet but clear. "My father always says that innocent people shouldn't have to defend themselves. The truth does that for them." Cooper scoffed. "Your father, some kind of lawyer? Community activist?" "Something like that," Jamal replied, his tone carrying an edge the officer was too arrogant to recognize. "What's his name, then?" "I'll make sure to tell him where to pick you up from the station." Jamal paused at the cruiser door, turning to meet Cooper's eyes with unsettling calm. "Leonardo Moretti, but he prefers to introduce himself." The name hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. The teenagers filming stopped mid-swipe. Mrs. Doyle's hands went still on her laundry basket. Even the traffic seemed to pause, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Moretti. A name whispered in city hall meetings and corporate boardrooms, a name attached to legitimate business empires and charitable foundations, and to rumors that ran much deeper, into places where official records couldn't reach. Cooper's jaw tightened, but he'd gone too far to back down now. "Nice try, kid." Every punk tries to name drop when they're caught. but his hand trembled slightly as he shoved Jamal into the back seat. Behind his sunglasses, doubt flickered like a warning light he chose to ignore. As the cruiser door slammed shut, Jamal settled into the seat with the kind of stillness his father had taught him. The patience of someone who knows that every action has a consequence and every mistake leaves evidence. Through the metal grating, he watched Cooper climb into the driver's seat, already writing the report that would bury him. Jamal's phone was still recording in his pocket, time-stamping every second, every word, every violation. His father had taught him that power isn't loud. It's precise. It waits. And when it moves, it doesn't miss. The cruiser pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the spilled milk, the stunned witnesses, and the kind of silence that screams louder than sirens. Officer Bradley Cooper had no idea he'd just arrested the son of the most dangerous man in the city. Not because Leonardo Moretti was violent, but because he was patient, strategic, and he'd raised his son to be exactly the same. By the time Cooper realized his mistake, the trap was already closing. Welcome to Life in Stories, where ordinary moments become unforgettable lessons. Here, every story reveals the power of truth, justice, and courage, reminding us that silence can be stronger than violence, and calm can be louder than fear. If you believe in stories that move hearts and open eyes, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next will show that every action has a consequence, and every story has a heartbeat. Lincoln City wore its divisions like scars. On the north side, where glass towers kissed the sky and coffee cost $8, people walked with the confidence of those who'd never been questioned. On the south side, where Jamal Andre lived with his grandmother Ruth, streetlights flickered like dying promises, and corner stores had bulletproof glass between customers and cashiers. The line between them wasn't just geography, it was survival. Jamal had learned to navigate that line carefully, head down, earbuds in, no sudden movements. At 15, he'd already mastered the art of being invisible, a skill his grandmother called staying out of trouble, and his father called strategic patience. Tuesday evening settled over 8th and Madison like a held breath. The September sun hung low, painting the cracked sidewalk in amber light that made everything look softer than it was. Jamal pushed through the door of Lincoln Grocery, the bell chiming above his head, a sound as familiar as his grandmother's voice calling him home for dinner. "Just milk, baby?" Mr. Abrams asked from behind the counter, his weathered hands already reaching toward the refrigerated section. "Yes, sir, the 2%. Grandma Ruth's making her mac and cheese tonight." Jamal's voice carried the quiet politeness Ruth had drilled into him since he was old enough to speak. "Yes, sir." "No, ma'am. Look people in the eye. Make them see you're human." Mr. Abrams smiled, the kind of tired smile worn by men who'd run the same store for 30 years, watching neighborhoods change and children grow. "That woman makes magic in a casserole dish. You tell her Solomon said hello." Jamal paid with exact change. Bills and coins carefully counted that morning from the envelope Ruth kept in the Kit Doyle drawer marked groceries. Every dollar accounted for, every purchase planned. The transaction took 90 seconds. 90 seconds that should have been forgettable. Jamal stepped back onto the sidewalk, the plastic bag swinging from his hand, the weight of the milk jug familiar and reassuring. 3 blocks home. 5 minutes. Grandma Ruth would already have the pot boiling, the cheese grated, the Kit Doyle smelling like comfort and safety. He made it exactly 11 steps. The police cruiser came around the corner with aggressive speed, tires squealing against asphalt as it jerked to a stop 6 inches from the curb. The sound shattered the evening's peace like a rock through glass. Jamal froze. He'd been taught this moment in conversations that started with when, not if, his grandmother's trembling hands gripping his shoulders, his father's calm voice on phone calls from wherever he conducted his mysterious business. Hands visible. Don't run. Don't argue. Survive first. Fight later. Officer Bradley Cooper emerged from the cruiser with the presence of a man who'd never questioned his own authority. At 42, he carried 17 years of commendations, community awards, and whispered complaints that never quite made it into official records. His uniform was pressed sharp, his boots polished mirror bright, his hand already resting on the weapon at his hip. "You!" Cooper's voice cut through the street noise. Traffic, distant music, Mrs. Doyle's television bleeding through her laundromat window. "Don't move!" Jamal's hands rose automatically, the plastic bag dangling from his fingers. The milk jug swayed. "Sir, I said don't move!" Cooper closed the distance in 4 aggressive strides, his jaw set in that expression Jamal had seen before. On teachers who'd already decided he was guilty, on store security who followed him down aisles, on a world that looked at his skin and wrote a story before he'd opened his mouth. Around them, the street transformed into an audience. Mrs. Doyle appeared in her doorway, dryer sheets still in her hands. 2 teenagers across the street stopped mid-conversation, phones already rising. A young mother pulled her daughter closer, whispering warnings that sounded like prayers. An older woman in a faded floral dress, Miss Carolyn from 3 houses down, stood by the bus stop, her phone already raised, recording. Her lips moved silently, narrating what she was witnessing, her hands steady despite her age. "We got a report of theft from this location." Cooper's breath smelled like coffee and certainty. "You fit the description." The description. Those 2 words that could mean anything and nothing. The description that was always just vague enough to justify suspicion, just specific enough to target. "Sir, I just bought milk." Jamal kept his voice level, calm, channeling every lesson his father had taught him about controlling fear. "Mr. Abrams can confirm. Hands on the wall, now." Cooper grabbed Jamal's shoulder and spun him around with unnecessary force. The plastic bag slipped from Jamal's fingers. Time seemed to slow as the milk jug fell, tumbling through the golden evening air. It hit the concrete with a sound like a gunshot. Sharp, final, irrevocable. White liquid exploded across the sidewalk in a starburst pattern, spreading in rivers between cracks and cigarette butts, pooling around Jamal's sneakers, the ones his grandmother had saved 3 months to buy him for school. The milk caught the fading sunlight, looking almost luminous, almost holy against the dirty concrete. Pure white against stained gray. Innocence against corruption. Something clean destroyed for no reason except proximity to power. Jamal watched it spread and felt a strange calm settle over him. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize the story's already been written and now you just have to play your part perfectly. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "When they take your dignity, don't give them your composure. That's the one thing they can't steal unless you surrender it." "Look what you did," Cooper muttered, shoving Jamal harder against the brick wall. The rough surface scraped Jamal's cheek, leaving a raw red mark. "Resisting arrest, destruction of property." "I'm not resisting, sir." Jamal's voice stayed steady, each word measured and clear. His right hand moved with practiced subtlety, fingers finding the phone in his jacket pocket, a birthday gift from his father that came with specific instructions. Double tap the side button. No sound, no light, just truth. Tap, tap. The phone vibrated once against his ribs so briefly only he could feel it. Recording activated. Audio, video, GPS, coordinates, timestamp, everything. Cooper yanked the handcuffs from his belt, metal glinting in the dying light. "You got anything to say for yourself, kid?" "My father always says that innocent people shouldn't have to defend themselves." Jamal kept his breathing controlled, his hand steady against the wall. The truth does that for them. Cooper laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Your father? Let me guess. Community organizer? Public defender? Another one of those activists who thinks the rules don't apply? Something like that. The handcuffs clicked around Jamal's wrists, cold metal biting into skin. Not tight enough to leave marks, but firm enough to humiliate. Cooper knew exactly how to apply them, practiced, efficient, legal enough to defend in any report. What's his name, then? Cooper asked, already pulling Jamal toward the cruiser, parading him past the growing crowd of witnesses. I'll make sure to let him know where to pick you up. If he bothers to show. Jamal turned his head slightly, meeting the officer's eyes with a directness that should have warned him. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Leonardo Moretti. But I don't think you'll need to call him. He has a way of knowing things. The name hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Cooper's grip tightened on Jamal's arm, but something flickered behind his eyes. Doubt. Recognition. The first hairline crack in his certainty. Moretti. The name whispered in city council meetings and precinct break rooms. The name attached to legitimate businesses and shadowy rumors. Nice try, kid. But Cooper's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like nervousness. Every punk tries to name-drop when they're caught. I'm not name-dropping, sir. Jamal kept his tone respectful, his father's training evident in every syllable. I'm informing you. There's a difference. Cooper shoved him into the back seat of the cruiser, the door slamming with metallic finality. Through the metal grating, Jamal could see the spilled milk still spreading across the sidewalk, a white accusation against the city's gray indifference. Mr. Abrams finally emerged from the store, receipt clutched in his trembling hand like evidence at a trial. Officer, wait. That boy paid for everything. I have the receipt right here. Unless you want to be charged with obstruction of justice, I suggest you step back inside. Cooper's voice carried the weight of 17 years of never being questioned, never being wrong, never facing consequences. Mr. Abrams looked at the receipt, then at Jamal through the cruiser window, then at the gathering crowd. His shoulders sagged with the familiar weight of compromise. I'm sorry, son. He retreated into the store. The bell chimed again, a sound like surrender. Cooper climbed into the driver's seat, already filling out the arrest report with the efficiency of muscle memory. His pen scratched across the form. Suspect, black male, approximately 15 years old. Charges, theft under suspicion, resisting arrest, destruction of property. The same words he'd written dozens of times before. The cruiser's engine rumbled to life. Through the window, Jamal could see the witnesses, some filming, some whispering, some simply watching with the exhausted expression of people who'd seen this story too many times to be surprised. That's the Andre kid, someone murmured. Jamal, another voice confirmed. Ruth's grandson. Good kid. Quiet. They always say that. A third voice responded, cynical and tired. Miss Carolyn kept recording, her phone tracking the cruiser as it began to pull away. Her voice, caught faintly on her own recording, whispered, Lord have mercy. That boy didn't do nothing. Nothing at all. The cruiser moved down 8th Street, past the laundromat and the check-cashing place and the church with the faded mural of Dr. King. Past the basketball court where Jamal played on Saturdays and the bus stop where he waited for the ride to his magnet school across town. Past all the ordinary landmarks of his ordinary life, now transformed into the root of his humiliation. In the back seat, Jamal sat perfectly still, his wrists aching from the handcuffs, his cheek stinging from the brick wall, his heart beating steady and controlled. He focused on his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way his father had taught him during their last visit. Fear is natural, Leonardo had said, his hand on Jamal's shoulder. But panic is a choice. Control your fear, and you control the situation, even when it seems like you have no power. Through the fabric of his jacket, Jamal could feel the phone against his ribs, a small warmth that meant everything. In his peripheral vision, barely visible through the material, a tiny red light blinked once every 3 seconds. Recording, documenting, preserving the truth in digital memory that couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be silenced, couldn't be made to look away. Cooper glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting Jamal's for just a moment. You know how many kids I've arrested who swore they were innocent? Who claimed they knew somebody important? Who thought they'd get away with it? Jamal didn't respond. Silence was its own form of power. This is Lincoln City, kid. Down here, the law is what I say it is. Your father, whoever he really is, he can't change that. The red light blinked again in Jamal's pocket. Blink truth preserved. Blink evidence collected. Blink the beginning of justice, patient and precise. Jamal allowed himself the smallest smile, not of defiance, but of understanding. His father had once told him that the most dangerous people aren't the ones who fight loudest, but the ones who document quietly and strike with precision when the moment is right. Officer Bradley Cooper had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He just didn't know it yet. But he would. Soon. The fluorescent lights of Lincoln City's 14th precinct buzzed like dying insects, casting everyone in the same sickly yellow glow that made guilt and innocence look identical. Jamal sat in the metal chair, his handcuffed wrists resting on the scratched table that had absorbed 1,000 confessions, 1,000 lies, 1,000 versions of truth twisted until it fit whatever narrative the room required. His posture remained straight, his breathing controlled, his dark eyes tracking every movement with the kind of awareness that usually came with age and experience. Cooper stood across from him, arms folded, studying the boy with growing irritation. Most kids broke by now. Tears, anger, desperate phone calls to parents who couldn't help them anyway. But this one just sat there, watching, waiting, like he knew something Cooper didn't. You think keeping quiet will save you? Cooper's voice carried an edge of frustration masked as authority. Jamal met his gaze without flinching. My dad says silence lets the truth speak louder. Your dad. Cooper laughed, the sound harsh in the small room. The one you claim is Leonardo Moretti? Kid, I've been working this precinct for 17 years. You know how many punks try that? My uncle's a lawyer. My cousin knows the mayor. My dad's connected. It's always something. I didn't say he was connected, Jamal replied quietly. I just said his name. Officer Davies, a younger cop with 3 years on the force and already the weariness of 10, leaned against the doorframe. Cooper, the store owner's outside, says he wants to show us the security footage. Later. Cooper waved him off without looking away from Jamal. I'm not finished here. Davies hesitated, then retreated, the door clicking shut behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. Cooper circled the table, his boots clicking against linoleum. Let's talk about your background, Jamal Andre. No father in the home. Mother dead. What was it, 3 years ago? Raised by your grandmother in subsidized housing on the South Side. Honor roll student, sure, but that doesn't mean much when you're stealing from corner stores. I paid for the milk. Jamal's voice remained level, each word measured. Mr. Abrams has the receipt. Receipts can be faked, especially when someone's trying to cover for you. Cooper leaned in close, his coffee breath washing over Jamal's face. "You fit a profile, kid. And in my experience, profiles exist for a reason." In Jamal's jacket pocket, draped over the chair back just out of Cooper's sight, the phone's red light blinked steadily. Recording, preserving, documenting every word, every threat, every violation. Across the city, in an office where floor-to-ceiling windows framed Lincoln City like a kingdom to be ruled, Leonardo Moretti sat behind a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly, his silver cufflinks caught the late evening light, and his expression remained completely unreadable. The tablet in his hands displayed a video, grainy, shaky, but clear enough. His son, against a wall, milk spreading across concrete like spilled innocence. Leonardo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only outward sign of the calculation happening behind his calm exterior. His assistant Ryan stood nearby. "It's already circulating on the underground networks. WorldStar picked it up 20 minutes ago. 300,000 views and climbing." "Before the precinct posts bail requirements?" "Yes, sir." Someone at the scene uploaded it immediately. Leonardo set down the tablet with deliberate care. "Miss Carolyn, most likely. She's always had good timing." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. "What precinct?" 14th. "Officer?" "Bradley Cooper. 17 years on the force. 12 excessive force complaints buried in administrative review. All dismissed." Leonardo's smile was thin, cold, like ice forming over deep water. "Not anymore." Back at the precinct, the booking officer processed Jamal's paperwork with mechanical efficiency. Name, age, address, charges, resisting arrest, theft under suspicion, destruction of property. Jamal was photographed, fingerprinted, cataloged like inventory. Through it all, he remained calm, polite, almost eerily composed for a 15-year-old facing his first arrest. The station phone rang at 9:47 p.m., cutting through the ambient noise of keyboards and radio chatter. The desk sergeant picked up, 14th Precinct. A pause, then his face went pale. Officer Cooper?" "Call for you. Line 3. Cooper grabbed the extension in the booking area, irritation evident in every movement. "This is Officer Cooper." Silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then a voice, calm, measured, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent that spoke of old money and older power. "Ah, Officer Cooper. My name is Leonardo Moretti. I believe you have my son." Cooper's grip tightened on the receiver. His eyes found Jamal, who sat perfectly still on the bench, watching with that same unsettling calm. "Your son?" Cooper's voice carried forced confidence. "Look, Mr. Moretti, if this is about the Andre kid, Jamal Andre Moretti. Yes." The name hung between them like a challenge. Cooper's jaw clenched. "Sir, if you're claiming to be this boy's father, you'll need to provide documentation." "Documentation?" Leonardo's voice carried the faintest hint of amusement. "Of course. I appreciate procedure, Officer Cooper. It keeps society civil. But I wonder, did you appreciate procedure when you arrested my son without cause?" "I had cause. We received a report. A report that will prove interesting in review, I'm certain." The temperature in Leonardo's voice dropped several degrees. "I understand mistakes happen, officer. But some mistakes have consequences." "Is that a threat?" "No." Leonardo's response was immediate, almost gentle. "It's an observation. Between fathers." The line went dead. Cooper stood frozen, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like a warning he was only beginning to understand. Cooper hung up the phone and laughed, a sharp, defensive sound that echoed through the booking area. "Some businessman thinks he can intimidate me with cryptic phone calls. Classic." Officer Davies looked up from his paperwork, uncertain. Who was it? Nobody. Just another parent trying to scare me into releasing their delinquent kid. Cooper tossed the receiver back onto its cradle with dismissive force. They always pull this act. Threats, connections, lawyers. Doesn't change the facts. But upstairs, in the precinct captain's office, the same name was causing a very different reaction. Captain Ellen Briggs stood with her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gripping the edge of her desk, hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Yes, sir. I understand. Leonardo Moretti. Yes, sir, the same one. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Her movements urgent in a way 17 years of command had trained her to hide from subordinates. Downtown, across the river where buildings wore their wealth like armor, Leonardo Moretti stood at his office window, watching the city lights paint patterns across the darkness. Behind him, Ryan compiled files with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. 3 offshore accounts traced back to Cooper, Ryan reported. 12,000 deposited over the last 6 months. Origins unclear, but the pattern matches typical payoff structures. Leonardo didn't turn from the window. Background? Bradley Cooper, born in Lincoln City, North Side. Father was a beat cop, died in the line of duty when Cooper was 19. He joined the force 6 months later. First 5 years were clean. Then something changed. Something always does. Leonardo's reflection in the glass was perfectly composed, but his eyes carried the cold calculation of a man who'd built empires on understanding exactly when and how people break. The complaints? Excessive force, primarily. Racial profiling, all filed by residents from the South Side, all dismissed by internal review, same reviewing officer each time. Who? Lieutenant Paul Hendricks, retired last year, currently living in a beachfront condo in Miami that his pension shouldn't afford. Leonardo smiled without humor. How thorough are we feeling, Ryan? The question is never how thorough, sir. It's how visible. Precisely. Leonardo turned from the window, his movements measured and elegant. My son spends one night learning what injustice tastes like. Officer Cooper spends the rest of his career learning what consequences feel like. These lessons should be proportional. In the holding cell at the 14th precinct, Jamal sat on the metal bench, his back straight despite exhaustion. Around him, 3 other detainees slept or muttered to themselves. But Jamal remained alert, his mind cycling through his father's lessons like prayers. Power listens more than it speaks. Patience is the sharpest weapon. Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. His father had taught him these things during visits that happened 3, maybe 4 times a year. Brief windows when Leonardo's mysterious business brought him back to Lincoln City. Jamal had learned not to ask questions about the business, just as he'd learned to observe, to document, to wait. The things his father never said spoke louder than words. At 11:34 p.m., the cell door opened. A woman in an immaculate burgundy suit stood in the corridor, briefcase in hand, her expression neutral, but her presence radiating the kind of authority that came from winning cases that never made it to court. Jamal Andre Moretti? Her voice was crisp, professional. Yes, ma'am. I'm Simone Laurent, your legal representation. You're being released immediately. All charges dropped pending review. Cooper appeared behind her, his face flushed with confusion and barely contained anger. Wait, who authorized this? I didn't get any. Captain Briggs authorized it 10 minutes ago. Laurent didn't even glance at him. All paperwork is filed, unless you'd like to contest a direct order from your commanding officer. Cooper's jaw worked silently. His eyes found Jamal, searching for something. Fear, maybe, or guilt, or the satisfaction of a rich kid getting away with something. But Jamal's expression remained carefully neutral, exactly as his father had taught him. The bail hearing isn't until tomorrow, Cooper protested weakly. There won't be a bail hearing. Laurent retrieved Jamal's belongings from the property clerk. Phone, wallet, the jacket with the recording still safely stored. The arrest itself is under administrative review. I'm sure you'll be contacted shortly about that process. She handed Jamal his possessions, her movements precise and final. As Jamal walked past Cooper toward the exit, he paused. Their eyes met. 15-year-old boy and 42-year-old officer, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with age or authority and everything to do with understanding. "My dad will call you again," Jamal said quietly. Not a threat. Just a fact. Then he was gone, following Laurent through the precinct doors into the night where a black town car waited, Ryan holding the door open like this was all perfectly routine. Cooper stood alone in the booking area, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the taste of something wrong settling in his mouth like copper. His personal phone vibrated in his pocket. Unknown number. Text message. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. You'll understand the cost of disrespect." Cooper stared at the screen as the message deleted itself 3 seconds later, leaving no trace except the cold certainty that he'd just crossed a line he didn't even know existed. Outside, the town car pulled away from the curb, carrying Jamal home to his grandmother, to safety, to the next chapter of a story that was just beginning. The internet doesn't sleep, and neither does injustice. By 6:47 a.m., the video had been viewed 847,000 times. By 7:15, it crossed 2 million. By the time Officer Bradley Cooper poured his first cup of coffee at 7:43, the number had reached 4.3 million and was climbing exponentially. The title was simple, devastating. "Black teen arrested for buying milk. Watch what happens next." The footage was crystal clear. Jamal's phone had captured everything. Cooper's aggression, the shattered milk spreading like spilled innocence, the handcuffs, the fabricated charges, and most damning of all, the audio. "You fit the description." Comments flooded in by the thousands. "This is why they tell us to record everything. That kid was so calm, his parents raised him right. ACAB every single time. Share this. Don't let them bury it." By 8 a.m., 3 local news stations had picked it up. By 8:30, CNN was running segments. The hashtags multiplied like wildfire. Hashtag justice for Jamal. Hashtag buying while black. Hashtag Lincoln City. PD. Hashtag Moretti Son. That last hashtag caught fire separately, spawning theories and whispers that transformed a simple arrest into something much larger. Cooper's phone started buzzing at 8:47 a.m. Text from Captain Briggs. "Get to my office. Now." He arrived at 8:56, still wearing yesterday's confidence like ill-fitting armor. Captain Briggs didn't invite him to sit. She simply turned her computer monitor toward him, the video playing on loop, the view counter spinning upward like a slot machine paying out justice. "Explain this." Her voice was granite. Cooper watched himself on screen. The shove, the aggression, the casual cruelty he'd performed 100 times before without consequence. Seeing it reflected back stripped away all the justifications he'd built over 17 years. "I responded to a call about theft." "There was no call." Briggs cut him off. "I checked. Dispatch has no record of any theft report from Lincoln Grocery that day, so either you fabricated probable cause or you acted on a hunch that just happened to target a black teenager." Cooper's jaw tightened. "I was doing my job." "Your job just cost this department its credibility and possibly millions in lawsuit settlements." Briggs leaned forward, her expression carved from ice. "The mayor's office called at 6:30 this morning. The commissioner called at 7:15, and at 8 o'clock, I got a very interesting call from someone at the district attorney's office recommending we cooperate fully with an independent investigation." "Investigation?" Cooper's voice cracked slightly. "Into you." Into this precinct. Into every arrest you've made in the last 5 years. Briggs stood, her chair scraping against the floor like a judge's gavel. You're suspended effective immediately pending— A knock interrupted her. Officer Davies stood in the doorway, his face pale. Captain, there's someone here. Says he needs to speak with you about the Andre case. I'm in the middle of— Ma'am. Davies' voice dropped to an urgent whisper. It's Leonardo Moretti. He's in the lobby. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Briggs's composure cracked for just a second, a flicker of recognition, of calculation, of the kind of fear that comes from understanding exactly who holds real power in a city. She recovered quickly, straightening her uniform. Escort him to conference room B, offer coffee. Be polite. She looked at Cooper. You're coming with me. Why? If he wants to file a complaint? Cooper. Briggs's tone carried 17 years of command and something new. Pity. You arrested Leonardo Moretti's son. Do you have any idea what that means? He's just some businessman. He owns the building your apartment is in. He's on the board of directors for the bank that holds the city's pension fund. He donated the new wing at Lincoln Memorial Hospital. And those are just the things on paper. Briggs moved toward the door. The things not on paper are what should terrify you. They walked through the precinct together, and Cooper noticed something he'd never seen before. Silence. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Officers found sudden interest in paperwork. Even the veteran cops who'd worked this precinct for decades avoided eye contact. The name Moretti moved through the building like a cold wind. Conference room B had windows overlooking the parking lot, where a black limousine sat like a panther among housecats. Inside the room, Leonardo Moretti stood examining the wall of commendations and community awards with the detached interest of someone evaluating merchandise. He turned as they entered. Tall, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that cost more than Cooper made in 2 months. Silver hair perfectly styled, dark eyes that missed nothing and revealed less. His presence didn't fill the room. It commanded it, the way gravity commands motion. Captain Briggs. Leonardo's voice was smooth, cultured, carrying the faint accent of old Italy. Thank you for seeing me. Mr. Moretti, I apologize for the circumstances. Leonardo's eyes shifted to Cooper, studying him with the clinical precision of a surgeon identifying where to cut. And this is Officer Cooper, I presume. He didn't offer his hand. The man who arrested my son for purchasing groceries. Cooper felt his throat go dry. Sir, there was a misunderstanding. No. Leonardo's interruption was gentle but absolute. There was no misunderstanding. There was an abuse of power captured on video and witnessed by dozens. What happens next is simple. Justice. He stepped closer, his movements elegant and unhurried. I'm here for my son's dignity, Officer Cooper. Let's discuss how you define justice, and how I define consequences. The interrogation room had hosted 1,000 confrontations, but never one like this. Leonardo Moretti sat with perfect posture, his hands folded on the scarred metal table as if it were mahogany. Jamal sat beside him, his bruised cheek a purple testament to yesterday's injustice. Across from them, Officer Bradley Cooper occupied the chair usually reserved for suspects, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Captain Briggs stood by the door, a silent witness to whatever was about to unfold. Leonardo spoke first, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd never needed to raise it. Officer Cooper, yesterday you arrested my son for fitting a description. I'm curious, what description was that? Cooper shifted in his seat. We received a report. You received nothing. Leonardo's interruption was surgical, precise. Dispatch confirms no call. The store owner confirms my son's innocence. Video evidence confirms your aggression. He paused, letting the silence sharpen his words. So I ask again, what description? Look, Mr. Moretti, in the heat of the moment. The heat of the moment. Leonardo repeated the phrase as if tasting something bitter. Is that what we call racial profiling now? A momentary lapse in judgment that just happens to target black children with statistical consistency. Cooper's jaw clenched. I don't have to sit here and... No, you don't. Leonardo's agreement was almost gentle. You could leave, resign, disappear into whatever retirement men like you dream about when the guilt keeps you awake at night. He leaned forward slightly. But you won't, because men like you believe the uniform makes you untouchable. From a leather portfolio, Leonardo extracted a manila folder and slid it across the table with deliberate care. Cooper stared at it like it might bite. Open it, Leonardo suggested. Cooper's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the cover. Inside, printed documents, highlighted sections, time-stamped incidents, his financial records, complaints from civilians, traffic stops with suspicious patterns, names, dates, amounts. His face went pale. How did you... The question died in his throat. How did I obtain confidential police records? Leonardo's smile was thin, cold. I invest in information, Officer Cooper. The software your precinct uses for data management, my company built it. The security protocols, my people designed them. When you logged those false charges against my son, you used a system I own. Cooper looked at Captain Briggs, desperate for intervention, but she remained stone-faced. Leonardo continued, his tone conversational, almost friendly. 12 excessive force complaints in 5 years, all against residents from the South Side, all dismissed by Lieutenant Hendricks, who retired quite comfortably, I noticed. $3,000 deposited into your account every 6 weeks from a shell corporation traced to evidence room discrepancies. That's... I can explain. I'm sure you can. The question is, will anyone believe you? Leonardo tapped the folder gently. See, Officer Cooper, you operate on a certain kind of power. The kind that comes from a badge and a gun and the assumption that the system will protect you. He sat back, completely relaxed. I operate on a different kind of power. The kind that doesn't need weapons because it owns the very foundations you stand on. Your pension fund? Invested through my financial group? Your union's legal defense fund? Managed by attorneys I have on retainer. The mayor who appoints your commissioner? Received substantial campaign contributions from my business associates. Cooper's breathing had become shallow, rapid. I'm not threatening violence, Leonardo said, his voice almost soothing. I'm promising accountability. Something you've avoided for 17 years. That ends today. Jamal spoke for the first time, his young voice carrying an eerie echo of his father's calm. You said I fit a description, Officer Cooper. Now you fit one too, of corruption, of prejudice, of everything wrong with unchecked authority. Leonardo stood smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket. We teach respect differently in my family, officer. My son documents injustice. I ensure consequences follow. He placed his hand on Jamal's shoulder. One uses truth as a weapon. The other uses truth as a foundation for justice. He moved toward the door, then paused. You'll be contacted by Internal Affairs within the hour. Federal investigators will follow shortly after. Those financial irregularities interest them greatly. The media already has the story. The public is watching. And I... Leonardo's smile was gentle, terrifying. I'll be ensuring nothing gets swept away this time. Captain Briggs opened the door. Leonardo and Jamal walked out together, father and son, leaving behind a man whose entire world was collapsing around him. Cooper sat frozen, staring at the dossier that detailed his downfall in neat, highlighted sections. His hands shook, not from anger, not from indignation, from fear, pure, primal fear. For 17 years, he'd wielded power without consequence, authority without accountability. He'd made people feel exactly what he was feeling now, helpless, exposed, at the mercy of forces beyond their control. The difference was, his victims had been innocent. He was not. Through the window, Cooper watched Leonardo and Jamal climb into the waiting limousine. The boy looked back once, his expression unreadable, before the door closed and the vehicle pulled away. Captain Briggs remained in the doorway. "Your badge and weapon. Now." Cooper's hands moved mechanically, unfastening the items that had defined his identity for nearly 2 decades. Real power, he'd just learned, doesn't carry a gun. It carries evidence, patience, and the quiet certainty that justice, delayed, is still justice. 3 weeks after the arrest that should have been forgotten, Lincoln City woke to a firestorm. The Lincoln Tribune broke the story at 6 a.m. Years of racial profiling exposed. Internal documents reveal systematic bias in 14th Precinct. By 7:30, every major news outlet had picked it up. The documents were meticulous, damning, impossible to ignore. Traffic stop data showing black drivers were stopped at rates 340% higher than white drivers in identical vehicles. Arrest records with suspicious patterns, complaint files that had been buried in administrative limbo for years, all anonymously delivered to the press in identical manila folders, highlighted sections and all. Cooper's name appeared 47 times across the documents. By noon, the police chief announced his resignation. By 3 p.m., the mayor called for a federal investigation. By evening, protesters gathered outside the 14th Precinct with signs reading, "Justice for Jamal" and "Accountability Now." The system that had protected Cooper for 17 years was devouring him in 17 days. At Lincoln High School, Jamal walked hallways transformed into a gauntlet of whispers and stares. That's him, the one from the video. His dad's like, connected, right? Some students nodded respect as he passed. Others pressed against lockers, creating distance as if his father's shadow might reach out and touch them. The label had shifted from victim to something more complicated, more dangerous. Protected. In AP history, Ryan Doyle slid into the seat beside him. "Yo, is it true your dad's in the Mafia?" Jamal didn't look up from his notebook. "My dad's a businessman." "Yeah, but like, what kind of business?" "The legal kind." Jamal's tone ended the conversation, but the questions followed him home, clinging to his clothes like smoke. Grandma Ruth was waiting in the Kit Doyle when he arrived, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. At 72, she carried the weight of raising 2 generations. Jamal's mother, gone 3 years to cancer, and now Jamal himself. "Sit down, baby." Her voice held that particular gentleness that preceded difficult truths. Jamal sat. Ruth studied his face, the fading bruise, the guarded eyes, the way he held himself with his father's careful composure. "That officer Cooper. They say he's finished. Career gone. Pension under investigation. Maybe even criminal charges." "Good." Jamal's response was immediate. "Is it?" Ruth's question hung in the air. "Baby, I taught you right from wrong. Your mama did too, God rest her. And I know your daddy's teaching you things I don't ask about because sometimes not knowing is easier than knowing." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "But revenge and justice aren't the same thing. One feeds on pain, the other heals it. You make sure you know which one you're chasing." Jamal met her eyes. Those same eyes that had comforted him through nightmares, celebrated his honor roll certificates, held him when they buried his mother. Dad taught me that proof changes everything, Grandma. Cooper didn't just hurt me. He's been hurting people for years. The proof stopped him. The proof, Ruth repeated softly. Or your father's power? The question settled between them like a weight neither wanted to lift. That evening, Leonardo arrived at Ruth's house in an unmarked sedan instead of the limousine, a concession to Ruth's discomfort with displays of wealth. He sat in the small living room, looking almost absurdly elegant against the worn furniture. Jamal showed him the forum invitation. Youth Summit on Police Reform. Keynote speaker Jamal Andre Moretti. They want me to speak publicly about what happened. Leonardo studied the invitation, then his son. You've done enough, son. The system is changing. Cooper is finished. You can step back now. Not yet, Dad. Jamal's voice carried quiet determination. Cooper arrested me, but the system enabled him. I don't want to just punish one bad cop. I want to fix the system that created him. Leonardo was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something rare, pride mixed with concern. You understand what happens when you step into that spotlight. You won't just be Jamal Andre anymore, you'll be a symbol. Some will make you a hero. Others will make you a target. Like you? Jamal asked. The question landed with precision. Leonardo smiled, thin and complicated. Yes, like me. Power protects, but it also isolates. Once people know your name carries weight, every interaction changes. Every friendship becomes questionable. Every achievement gets credited to your connections instead of your merit. I know. Jamal met his father's eyes. But if I stay silent now, Cooper was right about one thing. I do fit a description. Just another kid who got lucky, who had someone powerful save him. I want to be more than that. Leonardo stood, moved to the window overlooking the street where his son had been arrested 3 weeks ago. The spilled milk had long been washed away, but the stain on the city's conscience remained. Your mother, he said quietly, she always believed in systemic change. Said individual justice wasn't enough if the system stayed broken. He turned back to Jamal. She'd be proud of you. Terrified, but proud. What about you? Leonardo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I'm both. Always. He straightened his jacket. But if you're going to step into this, do it right. Don't just tell your story. Tell theirs. He gestured toward the window, toward the neighborhood. All the others who didn't have phones recording, didn't have fathers with resources. Make it bigger than revenge. Make it justice, Jamal finished. Exactly. Lincoln Community Center hadn't seen this many people since the mayoral election. Every seat filled, standing room overflowed into the hallways, and 3 news cameras formed a row at the back like mechanical witnesses to history. The forum's banner read, Police Accountability, Moving Forward Together. But everyone knew why they were really here. To see the boy from the video, to hear Jamal Andre Moretti speak. Leonardo sat in the last row, positioned where he could see everything while remaining unremarkable, a skill he'd perfected over decades. His tailored suit drew a few glances, but most attention fixed on the stage where Jamal sat among panel members. The interim police chief, a civil rights attorney, a city councilwoman, and a pastor whose church had buried too many victims of police violence. Jamal wore the same button-down shirt he'd worn for his school photo, pressed, simple, deliberate. At 15, he looked younger than the weight he was about to carry. The moderator, a veteran journalist named Patricia Owens, introduced him last. And finally, Jamal Andre, a Lincoln High sophomore whose recent experience has sparked citywide conversation about policing and accountability. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Jamal approached the podium, adjusted the microphone with steady hands, and let the silence settle before speaking. 3 weeks ago, I walked out of Lincoln Grocery with milk for my grandmother's mac and cheese. His voice was calm, measured, carrying to every corner of the room. I made it 11 steps before Officer Bradley Cooper decided I fit a description. The room held its breath. I was thrown against a wall. Handcuffed. Arrested for theft I didn't commit, resisting arrest I never attempted, and destruction of property that happened when the officer knocked the milk from my hands? Jamal paused. But this story isn't just about me. He clicked a remote. The screen behind him illuminated with a photograph. A young black woman, maybe 19, standing beside a car. This is Tasha Williams, stopped by Officer Cooper in 2019 for failure to signal. She was 3 blocks from home. The traffic stop lasted 45 minutes. She filed a complaint. It was dismissed. Click, another photo. A teenage boy. Ryan DuPont, 14 years old, stopped and searched outside his own apartment building in 2020. No charges filed. Complaint dismissed. Click, an elderly man. Robert Doyle, 67, detained during his morning walk because someone reported a suspicious person in the neighborhood where he'd lived for 30 years. Complaint dismissed. Click, click, click. Faces filled the screen. A mosaic of Lincoln City's forgotten victims. Names, dates, complaint numbers, all filed, all dismissed, all involving the same officer. Yesterday I was a suspect, Jamal continued, his voice gaining strength. Today, I'm a witness. Tomorrow, I'll be a voice for everyone whose complaints were buried, whose dignity was stolen, whose stories were dismissed because they didn't have video evidence or the right last name. In the audience, cameras captured tears, nodding heads, clenched fists. My arrest went viral because someone filmed it, because my father has resources to fight back, because I got lucky. Jamal's eyes swept the crowd. But luck shouldn't determine justice. Documentation shouldn't be the only defense against abuse of power, and we shouldn't need a national news cycle to hold one officer accountable when the system ignored 17 years of evidence. The councilwoman on the panel wiped her eyes. The interim chief sat rigid, his jaw tight. Officer Cooper violated my rights, Jamal said, voice unwavering. But the system that protected him for 17 years violated all of us. That's what we're here to fix. Not one bad cop. The entire structure that makes bad cops possible. He clicked to the final slide. The Proof Project. Youth-led Police Accountability Initiative. Starting next month, Lincoln High students will launch a program teaching young people how to document interactions with police, file complaints effectively, and demand systemic change. We're partnering with legal advocates, civil rights organizations, and anyone who believes that justice shouldn't require going viral. The applause started small, then built like thunder. Jamal raised his hand for silence. This isn't about revenge. My grandmother taught me that revenge and justice aren't the same thing, but my father taught me something too, that proof changes everything, that silence can be strategic, that power isn't loudest when it shouts, but when it acts with precision and purpose. At the back of the room, Leonardo's expression remained neutral, but his hands, folded in his lap, tightened almost imperceptibly. So I'm asking everyone here, don't just be angry. Document, organize, demand accountability, turn your pain into education, turn your fear into action. Jamal's voice dropped, intimate despite the microphone. Because the system only changes when we refuse to let it stay the same. The standing ovation shook the building. Cameras flashed. The hashtag Proof Project began trending within minutes. News anchors scrambled to update their coverage. Across town, in a small apartment that smelled like failure and cheap whiskey, Bradley Cooper watched the live stream on his laptop. His name scrolled across the bottom ticker. Disgraced officer at center of viral arrest faces federal investigation. Another hashtag crawled beneath, power without badges. His career, his reputation, His entire identity, gone. Dismantled by a 15-year-old boy who'd done nothing except document the truth and refuse to be silent. At the community center, Leonardo waited until the crowds thinned before approaching his son. They stood apart from the lingering reporters, in a quiet corner where father and son could speak without performance. "You did well," Leonardo said simply. Jamal searched his father's face. "But..." "No, but..." Leonardo's smile was faint, complicated. "Just observation. Your path is cleaner than mine ever was. You fight with truth and transparency. Quote. He paused. "I operate differently." "I know," Jamal said quietly, "but I'm still your son." "Yes, which is both my pride and my concern." Leonardo placed his hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You've started something that can't be stopped now. That's power. Real power. Just remember that it comes with consequences," Jamal finished. "You taught me that too." Leonardo nodded. Around them, Lincoln City buzzed with new possibility, dangerous hope, and the fragile promise that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. 6 months after the arrest that changed everything, Lincoln City looked different in ways both visible and invisible. Officer Bradley Cooper's resignation became official on a gray Tuesday morning, processed with the same bureaucratic efficiency that had once protected him. No ceremony, no handshake, just paperwork, a surrendered badge, and a pension under permanent investigation. His name became a case study in police reform seminars, a cautionary tale whispered in precinct break rooms across the nation. He moved to a smaller town 3 states away, where nobody recognized his face and the internet felt slightly less inescapable. But the videos followed him. The hashtags never truly died. Some mistakes don't fade, they calcify into legacy. At Lincoln High School, room 247 transformed into headquarters for something unprecedented. The Proof Project started with 12 students, 2 donated laptops, and Jamal's relentless conviction that documentation could dismantle injustice. Within 3 months, it expanded to 17 schools across the city. Within 5 months, chapters sprouted in Chicago, Atlanta, Oakland. The mission statement hung above the door in Jamal's careful handwriting. "We teach young people to document safely, report effectively, and demand accountability." Because proof doesn't argue, it testifies. Students learned their rights through role-play scenarios, practiced de-escalation techniques, memorized the difference between compliance and consent. Most importantly, they learned to activate recording devices with muscle memory precision. Double tap, no light, just truth. The program operated on donations that arrived through mysterious channels. Anonymous grants from foundations with names that meant nothing to most people, but everything to those who understood Lincoln City's power structures. Every check, every resource, every legal consultation, funded by money that moved through legitimate channels but originated from a single source. Leonardo Moretti's name appeared nowhere on the paperwork, but his presence haunted every success like a benevolent shadow. On a Wednesday in late spring, CNN's education correspondent sat across from Jamal in the Proof Project office, cameras rolling, America watching. "You've been called a lot of things since that video went viral," she said. "Activist, hero, even radical by some critics. How do you see yourself?" Jamal considered the question with the thoughtful precision that had become his trademark. "I see myself as someone who got arrested for buying milk and decided that wasn't an acceptable story ending." "Your father, Leonardo Moretti, there's been speculation about his involvement in your advocacy work." "My father taught me that fear changes nothing," Jamal replied, his voice steady. "But proof changes everything. He taught me to document, to be strategic, To understand that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the most powerful. And what's the most powerful? Jamal smiled slightly. The one with receipts. The interview went viral within hours. The quote became a rallying cry. T-shirts appeared at protests. The one with receipts. Across town, in a study where imported leather and old money created an atmosphere of controlled elegance, Leonardo Moretti watched the interview on mute. The closed captions scrolled across the screen, translating his son's words into text that felt both familiar and foreign. His 15-year-old son spoke with the moral clarity Leonardo had spent decades compromising. Jamal wielded truth like a sword, while Leonardo had always preferred shadows, legal enough to survive scrutiny, questionable enough to accomplish what courts couldn't. Different weapons, same war. Ryan entered quietly, tablet in hand. The Proof Project's expansion request just got approved. 15 new cities by fall. Full funding secured through the usual channels. Leonardo nodded without looking away from the screen, where Jamal explained de-escalation techniques to a national audience. He's building something clean, Leonardo said softly. Something that doesn't need to hide in tax havens and shell corporations. Yes, sir. A legacy without asterisks. Leonardo's smile was complicated, pride tangled with something that might have been regret. Justice, he murmured. The cleanest form of power. That night, long after Ryan had left and the city settled into its uneasy sleep, Leonardo composed a text message with the care of a man who understood that words, like bullets, couldn't be recalled once fired. The message went to a number only he and Jamal knew, a private line, encrypted, used for conversations that required absolute trust. You did well, son. The world needs fewer monsters wearing uniforms, and more men wearing truth. Your mother would be proud. I am proud. Build something I never could, a legacy without shadows. He hovered over the send button for 3 full seconds before pressing it. The message delivered. Red receipt appeared almost immediately. 3 dots indicated typing, then stopped, then started again, then stopped. Finally, a single response. Thank you, Dad, for everything, even the things you won't tell me about. Leonardo set the phone down, poured 2 fingers of whiskey he wouldn't drink, and stood at the window overlooking Lincoln City's glittering sprawl. Somewhere out there, his son was building a movement, creating change through transparency, accountability, proof. All the tools Leonardo had weaponized in darkness, Jamal was wielding in daylight. Different paths. Same destination. Justice. In his small bedroom 3 miles away, Jamal closed his phone and looked out the window at the same city his father surveyed from a different altitude. The street where he'd been arrested was visible from here. The corner store, the sidewalk, the spot where milk had spilled like prophecy. He wasn't the same boy who'd walked out of Lincoln Grocery 6 months ago. That boy had been invisible, untested, unaware of the power dormant in documentation and the strength hidden in strategic calm. This version, the one reflected in the dark window, was different. Not fearless, but unafraid. Not powerful in the way his father was powerful, but powerful nonetheless. A boy no longer, a man in the making. Outside, Lincoln City hummed with its usual contradictions. Beauty and brutality, hope and history, systems that broke people and people who refused to stay broken. Jamal's phone buzzed once more. A notification from the Proof Project's main account. 500,000 followers reached. Movement growing. He smiled, turned off the light, and slept the sleep of someone who'd turned pain into purpose. Tomorrow, there would be more work, more documentation, more justice to pursue. But tonight, there was simply rest, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to corrupt power isn't destroy it violently. It exposes it truthfully. Thank you for watching another powerful story from Life in Stories. Every moment here reminds us that justice, kindness, and courage still matter, even in a world that often forgets. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe to join a community where every story has meaning and every voice is heard. Because here at Life in Stories, we don't just tell stories, we tell the ones that make you feel.